And the reason why they're important practices is because I mentioned earlier that we don't enjoy the commons much anymore. Many of us, we don't like it. We want to kind of avoid it. We want to stay in our communities. And if I just preach, oh, we should engage in the commons, we should be nicer to each other, we should do this, we should do that, right? It doesn't do anything. What you need to do is, in a sense, show how enjoyable it is to be in the commons. That it's actually really fun to be rub up against people. It's sometimes awful, but it's also where the possibility of something incredible might happen, right? So that very place where disaster could occur is also the place where your life could be transformed. And in order to be able to cope with the tornado of the commons, the storm of the commons, we need to, in a way, learn to practice enjoyment of it and become resilient to it. There's at the moment I have like 4 decentering practices: Atheism for Lent, the Last Supper, the Evangelism Project, and the Omega Course. And I'll mention them all very briefly, but I'll just do one in detail. So Atheism for Lent, most of you know about. Over Lent, we look at all the great critiques of God, but the critiques of God philosophically and theologically, and we kind of show how these critiques are found within the theological tradition, within a philosophical tradition. There's the atheism of kind of new atheists. There's also the atheism of mysticism. There's the atheism of existentialism. And we explore that, and we kind of like enjoy exploring and being decentered. So that's Atheism for Lent. And that brings us up to the end of Lent, where we encounter God experience and existential atheism. My God, why have you forsaken me? So it's this a kind of exploration, and it's done in a fun way. It's called Atheism for Lent, and it's an intellectual enterprise, but also a very existential one as well, right? So that's Atheism for Lent. The Omega Course, very quickly, is like the Alpha Course, except it's slightly different. So the Alpha Course, if you know it, is you kind of an entry into Christianity over 12 weeks where you discuss topics like the crucifixion, right, or the resurrection, or the Holy Spirit. And the whole idea is you get into a group, you chat about these issues, and then at the end there's a little video kind of tells you what you should think and introduces you to Christianity. Well, the Omega Course is kind of like a 6-week course designed to exit Christianity. Well, exit a certain form of it, where you still do the same topics as the Alpha Course, but instead of you being brought to one conclusion, what happens in the Omega Course is you hear a really good conservative view of something, say the crucifixion. You hear a really good interpretation from, say, a liberal position, and you hear a really good interpretation from outside the theological tradition entirely. And you just do those as a way of then having a discussion to show how rich and diverse the conversation is around these subjects. And then through that, you're decentered, you're disrupted in your thinking, and you start to see things in different ways, right? So Atheism for Lent is obviously decentering because you see the other. Often people who do Atheism for Lent maybe have never really read these great critiques, and then they see themselves through the eyes of those critiques, and it's disruptive. So that's Atheism for Lent. You see yourself through the eyes of these others. Omega Course, it's the same. You realize you're seeing yourself through the eyes of the other. Then there's the Evangelism Project, where you go to be evangelized by other groups. Now, the evangelism isn't where you say you go to the Islamic Society and you say, I want to become a Muslim. But rather, you talk about the ideas, the beliefs and practices. And then in the Evangelism Project, the real key is to say, well, what do we look like to you? So say it's a Christian community. Go like, what does the Christian community look like through your eyes? And the evangelism happens because you see yourself through their eyes, see dimensions of yourself that you haven't seen before. And again, you're disrupted and disoriented through the eyes of the other. And then the Last Supper. The Last Supper is where 12 people gather together, bring someone with a controversial view who over food tells you what they believe and articulates it, and then you have a debate, and it's called the Last Supper because if you don't like what they say, it's their last supper, right? And they're in the seat of Christ. You go like, well, you know what we did with him, so be careful, right?